Now, many people expect Caleb Williams to be the number one overall pick in the 2024 NFL draft. Then he's regarded by most draft analysts out there to be one of the greatest quarterback prospects ever. He's been getting a lot of comparisons to Patrick Mahomes, and a lot of people were already really high on both Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, but many people expect Caleb Williams to have even more hype than those two guys had coming into this past year's NFL draft. And we're going to be discussing what are some teams that could potentially look to tank for Caleb Williams going into this season. Now, let me lay out what I mean by tanking. I'm not saying teams are going into this year in week one right out the gate they're going to start trying to tank for Caleb Williams. These teams could start out the season pretty slow and then get to the middle way portion, week 8, week 9, and just decide, hey, we're not going to be that good for the remainder of the year. We're just going to chalk it up and try to tank for Caleb Williams. So let's start off with the first team that I have, which are the Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals, we know that Kyler Murray is going to miss the first half of the season for Arizona. And when he comes back, the Arizona Cardinals aren't going to have the greatest roster around him in order for him to win and lead them to the postseason or much success this year. They have a new head coach, a new coaching staff, a new general manager, and Kyler Murray wasn't the quarterback who this new regime drafted. So when you have a quarterback who's this good of Caleb Williams' caliber, and you have Kyler Murray, who his play kind of has went down over the last couple of seasons, plus he's coming off an injury, a major injury at that, maybe the Arizona Cardinals could look to move on from Kyler Murray and trade him after the season ends and try to draft Caleb Williams, if they're in a position to get Caleb Williams. Now, they are expected to have 2 high draft picks. If they do end up becoming the worst team in the NFL this season, they basically will end up having the number 1 overall selection. And depending on what the Houston Texans do this year, they probably could end up having another top 5 or top 10 pick. So you could end up drafting Caleb Williams. Then maybe you could end up getting Marvin Harrison Jr. out of Ohio State. But when it comes to the possibility of Arizona taking for Caleb Williams, I think that this is a high chance that this could end up happening. Caleb Williams, he could be an upgrade from Kyler Murray. Many people have questions about Kyler Murray's commitment to the game of football when it comes to his study habits. You remember the whole stipulation that they threw into his new contract with him having to watch a certain amount of hours of film, and then they ended up taking it out because it ended up giving Kyler Murray a really bad look. But with this new coaching staff, if Kyler Murray ends up not really getting along with the new coaches or the new GM and he ends up not playing all that well, they could look to trade him elsewhere and end up moving on and drafting Caleb Williams. The next team that could be in the realm of trying to tank for Caleb Williams are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, have you guys not seen the Buccaneers OTA so far? Kyle Trask and Baker Mayfield look god-awful. I mean, they're overthrowing wide receivers that's running routes on air with no defensive backs. Kyle Trask can't really hit an accurate receiver to save his life so far during OTAs. It's just looking really bad for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback situation going into this year. And the Buccaneers offensive line isn't good neither. Yeah, they have a really good defense and really good wide receivers such as Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, but their quarterback situation could ultimately be the reason why they could be in range to just go ahead and tank for Caleb Williams. And if you get Caleb Williams and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are still on the roster next season, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, without a doubt, could end up having a really good chance of making it back to the postseason next season if they are able to tank successfully and get that number 1 overall pick for Caleb Williams. But you just look at the way their quarterback situation looks right now with Baker and Kyle Trask, it definitely looks like they're going to have a really high chance at being able to land Caleb Williams. What about the Las Vegas Raiders, man? There's already many Raiders fans who already want to throw the towel in on this season and just go all in for tanking for Caleb Williams. I've already seen a bunch of tank for Caleb Williams fan pages on Twitter. I've seen some Raiders fans who have their Twitter profile of Caleb Williams in the Las Vegas Raiders jersey photoshopped. So many Raiders fans definitely are on board when it comes to the idea of throwing the towel in on this season and trying to go all in for Caleb Williams. And plus, you look at Jimmy Garoppolo, the dude already isn't fully healthy. When they first tried to sign him, the dude had a nagging injury coming from his late season injury that he suffered with the San Francisco 49ers. So it turns out he actually did need surgery for it the whole time. So Jimmy Garoppolo, he ends up signing with the Raiders, and they end up editing the contract to add a addendum to it. So if Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't pass his physical and he's not able to play for the Raiders come week 1 of the regular season, they could end up releasing him without having to pay him a single dime. So then that could put them in a situation where they might have to start Brian Hoyer or Aiden O'Connell, and they could end up sucking so bad that they could end up having the number 1 overall pick and getting Caleb Williams. But even if Jimmy Garoppolo plays this year and he is fully healthy going into week 1, I don't think he's going to be able to hold up for the full 17-game season. Jimmy Garoppolo, during his time with the 49ers, he only played, 1 season when he was fully healthy? So even if Jimmy G is ready to go come the start of this year, I don't expect the Raiders to be all that good. I don't really see them winning no more than 4 to 5 games max. When you look at the AFC West division, you already have Kansas City. You got the LA Chargers, who are going to be really good. The Denver Broncos are going to be way better with Sean Payton as their head coach. The Las Vegas Raiders, I don't really see any way they win more than 4 or 5 games this year. I don't believe in Josh McDaniels as their head coach, and many Raiders fans feel the same way I feel about this organization right now. So I definitely think out of all the teams who could really end up throwing the white flag at the middle of the season and just saying, F it, let's just go ahead and try to get Caleb Williams, I think the Raiders most definitely could be that team come week 8, week 9. The season isn't going right. People have already lost faith in the locker room and Josh McDaniels. I definitely think the Raiders could be in a situation come the middle half of this season where they just chalk it up and just say, let's just go ahead and try to tank for Caleb Williams. And the last team that I think could tank for Caleb Williams are the Tennessee Titans. And Titans fans, if you're watching this, you're probably going to be really pissed off right now because you're going to be saying, JT, Mike Vrabel is way too good of a head coach for the Titans to be trying to tank for any quarterback. And you are right to an extent, but looking at the Tennessee Titans schedule, man, it's not the easiest. They play some really tough teams. Offensively, their offensive line isn't good. They don't really have any proven wide receivers. They drafted Treylon Burks in the first round of this past year's draft, but he hasn't really shown too much promise on the field. He has been making a lot of noise so far for Tennessee throughout OTAs, but even if he ends up being their number 1 wide receiver, who else is Ryan Tannehill going to be throwing the football to? Plus, Ryan Tannehill, he could be at a point of his career where he starts to regress. Now, he may not regress and become one of the worst QBs in the league, but he definitely could regress for, he could end up regressing from a top 13, top 14 QB to becoming a top 20, top 21 quarterback in the league, which would make him a bottom tier starter, almost a fringe starter at this point. And you got to remember that the Titans have drafted a quarterback in the last 2 drafts. They drafted Malik Willis, and just recently they drafted Will Levis. So Will Levis and Malik Willis, neither one of those guys have looked really promising. Will Levis is struggling at OTA so far for Tennessee, and Malik Willis, he's struggling as well. He hasn't really made too much improvement also. So the Tennessee Titans could probably be right around the 2024 NFL draft in a position where they could be eyeing drafting another quarterback, but this time trying to make sure that they go big and walk away with Caleb Williams. And for Tennessee, they also could be a team that late in the year, Mike Vrabel and the general manager get together and they just say, man, like this season isn't going well for us. We're not even close to being able to compete for a playoff spot. So let's just go ahead, chalk up the season. Let's just bench Ryan Tannehill, throw Will Levis or Malik Willis out there, whoever, and let's try to get that number one pick to get Caleb Williams. Now, this isn't really ideally because this isn't something that I don't think Mike Vrabel would be a big fan of, but I think if their general manager guarantees that Mike Vrabel is going to be back as a head coach next season, I could see him on board with that, because why would he just want to go out there and continue to lose and then not be in a position to get a franchise QB? Mike Vrabel is a guy that, although he is ultra competitive, and even though I'm not expecting Tennessee to be awful when it comes to an on the field standpoint, even if they have a bad record where they only win 4 or 5 games, most of those games are going to be really close, because you know the kind of team Tennessee is. They're a scrappy football team. They're going to fight, claw, and find ways to try to stay with you in games that they have no business being in. You remember how they almost beat Kansas City last year with Malik Willis at QB, and that was on the road in Arrowhead. So for Tennessee, this is a team that I don't think they're going to win a lot of games this year. I definitely expect them to have a really high draft pick next season, but I don't think it's going to be a season where they're just getting blown out and they're not going to be competitive in their games like the Raiders, the Buccaneers, and the Cardinals possibly are going to be. I think Tennessee still has the potential to be good enough where they put themselves in a situation where they're not going to be able to tank for Caleb Williams. That's if Mike Vrabel doesn't want to go ahead and throw in the towel on the season. They just want to try to find a way just to make it to the postseason or just try to be competitive. But ideally, looking at the Titans schedule, I don't really have them winning no more than 5 to 6 games max. So I definitely could see them tanking for Caleb Williams. But these are the teams that I think could possibly tank for Caleb Williams this upcoming season.